Okay. Um, I figure I gotta do a video because this has like been a very weird month. Um, I got out of the hospital 2 weeks ago, uh, which is really well. Okay, let's go back. Before I went into the hospital, I had about a week or so of uh, vomiting and diarrhea and just overall was not feeling great by the day that I went into the hospital, which was 3 weeks ago. I was in such excruciating abdominal pain uh, and throwing up that I just couldn't handle it. So I had to go into the hospital. Called first, had a nurse practitioner ask my symptoms and do a check for COVID and all this stuff, which I didn't have. Um, Still don't. Uh, Went into the hospital. Um, they did uh, abdominal x-rays. Then I was told that I needed to get my gallbladder out. And um, I mentioned that I needed a liver biopsy that I had been waiting on for a long time. So they said, "Oh yeah, we can do a liver biopsy for you too." And I was like, "Okay," thinking that's the sum total of the problems. Um, they had to wait a day before they could do it. So I was in the hospital for a day, and that's when I had my first major dystonic storm. Now, for those who are new to the channel, I suffer from Dopa Responsive Dystonia. Um, Basically, my brain's not getting enough dopamine, so signals get muddled. Um, it causes twitching and speech impediments, but I'm on my pill right now, so yeah. And this is going to come back to that as well by the end of this story, so just stay with me. So, I have a major dystonic storm. Affected my whole body where I was having spasms and locking up with massive teeth chattering um, and um, difficulty breathing, uh, full on body spasms. Uh, Basically, an epileptic seizure, which I did not know until this happened, that dystonic storms are actually epileptic seizures, grand mal or minor mal seizures, but the person's conscious for it. So when it happened, I remembered all of these symptoms had happened to me before when I was a kid. Except back then, we just thought it was hypothermia. So they wrapped me in a whole bunch of blankets and shit and were freaking out and trying to warm me up. But it was just me having a seizure, but I was conscious and talking to them. But talking to them was what allowed me to get through the whole seizure. So when it happened at the hospital, and I now knew that I had dopa responsive dystonia and what a dystonic storm could be, I didn't, I was able to use my history and say, just keep talking to me and let me answer questions, whatever it is, just let my brain find something else to focus on. And it passed. But then asking Google what that was, a dystonic storm, and having uh, finding out that it's an epileptic seizure, I was like, wow, okay. So this has been going on my whole life. and I didn't even know it was happening, because when I was a kid, I was hit by a truck, a delivery truck, seafood delivery truck, hit me on one side of the road. I literally flew to the other side of the road, smashed my head on the curb, and I was over a block away from my house, and my mom heard me screaming, so she came running, and I went to the hospital. Now, they thought I was going to be dead or in a coma for the rest of my life, um, or dead within 24 hours. Um, I had fractured my skull, torn up my eyebrow. Uh, my face still, when I do massive activity, will get all red and puffy. But back then, there wasn't any follow-up or anything. I was sent home after a week, which stunned them, because they thought I'd be in hospital for therapy for months and months and months and months. But I was sent home after 5 days, because they're like, well, he seems fine. There was never a follow-up, believe me. I never went back in and had them recheck my head and all that stuff. At least not to my memory. It was a different time. It was back then. It was, hey, if you can walk it off, he's fine. Now I realize there's a lot of stuff that happened to me that I really shouldn't have normally been conscious for, and yet I was, which is rather twisted and, well, how I lived my life, because believe me, I cracked my head a lot. Now, back to the hospital. Having had the history of what I thought was hypothermia and dealing with it because of the fractured skull, I now know that was probably what caused the Dopa Responsive Dystonia, thanks to one of the nurses who looked it up. And I was like, good, I learned a lot about this Dopa Responsive Dystonia. I also learned that I was having rigors, which is where you get cold and then break out into a massive sweat. Like, I was sweating from head to toe. They had me packed in with ice, and I had wet face cloths all over me to cool me off. That was happening for a very long time, apparently, because I was always hot and sweaty. Like, I would go out in the winter and in a t-shirt and still be breaking a sweat. So my body has been trying to tell me about all the stuff that happened at the hospital before I got to the hospital, long before, and I tried to find out this stuff, but it all crashed in at one time. Now, that said, when they did the surgery, I woke up and I was still in agonizing abdominal pain. Now, whether that was from the surgery or from the next part of the story, I don't know. But I was still in excruciating pain, like horrific pain, and was still sick for another 4 days at the hospital. Found out that they also found a hernia, which they fixed. So I had the gallbladder removed, a liver biopsy, and a hernia repaired. And the pain didn't subside. So I was still throwing up, still unable to go to the bathroom, which apparently is very important before you leave the hospital. Like, if I did, not a lot came out. And then when I started to, there was a lot of blood. And I was still in excruciating pain. So my brain literally was snapping. I had another dystonic storm, which was easier to deal with now that I knew what the hell was actually happening. Got through that. um, had they had me on oxygen the whole time, uh, up until the last 2 days, um, because my lungs were at less than 50%, which ties back to my past once again, because I'm pretty sure I remember when I started slowing down, and that was after I had my appendix taken out, which would have been around 2000, before 2007, around 2005 maybe, I think. And that had me laid up for a week or so because I had an infection in that instance as well after the surgery, and then had to take it easy because I have a huge scar for that one. It was necrotic, and they had to remove it, but that's another story. Um, but since then, I noticed myself slowing down, and then the dystonia started, um, or the Dopa Responsive Dystonia, but the actual dystonic twitches and such that I would get started. But I was still having a hard time breathing back around 2007, because I went to a heart doctor to, well, I went to my family doctor. He sent me to a heart specialist, because I was having chest pains, and they put me on uh, isopropyl and propofol, which are beta blockers and such to slow my heart rate down, which is still from high. At the time, my resting was like around 147 to 180, and that was just lying there doing nothing. Um, then it would drop to like something like 30 to 60 and then bounce right back up. Different story. Trust me, there's probably going to be a whole bunch of videos just me telling these stories because I have to get them out. So stay tuned. But that said, I know that I was short of breath starting way back in 2007, and it never got diagnosed. So to find out that I finally had like less than 50% use of my air flow and damage to my lungs because they had sort of collapsed or something. I don't know. They don't really give me the specifics. Uh, they have me on inhalers now to help to loosen up the crap and expand my lungs, and I've gotten it from about a liter on Air Life. You can look those up if you don't know what they are, too, which is just a metric to see how good you can breathe, which is about a liter of air to now around 3 liters of air. But the best mark on the breathing thing is 4 liters, so I'm striving for that. And sometimes when I have a good day, I can actually get that 4 liters now, which is good. So I found out by about the midpoint of the week that I had uh, an ulcer, or not an yeah, hernia. I had a hernia. I had a biopsy. I had my gallbladder removed, and then I had bad lungs. Um, so all of those were getting fixed. Now, this whole time after the dystonic storm on the first night, that kind of freaked them out. So they gave me the pill, my levodopa carbidopa pill. The thing is, I normally don't take it at night so that I can actually sleep. Uh, but they were so freaked that they had me take it every 3 hours every day for 3 days. So I got no sleep. By the fourth day, I was freaking out because I had no sleep. Um, and I could understand them having seen two dystonic storms. I just kind of looked at it as like, eye opener. This is the same stuff that happened when I was a kid. But them, they were freaked out, so they even ran out of their own pills and started using my pills, which I had brought with me because, well, I need to take my pills at least during the day. Um, and by the end, I was terrified to take my pills because one of the side effects is it upsets your stomach and can cause other problems with your digestion, like constipation and such. So not only did they want me to poop, they had me on these, which was making me not poop. And I couldn't eat anymore because I was throwing up so much. So after they found out about the lung problem, I was telling them, just begging them, because I still had the abdominal pain, for antibiotics. And then finally they came in and they went, "Oh yes, here's an antibiotic for your lungs. Take this." So it was this tiny little wafer thing that I had to put under my tongue and wait for it to dissolve. Then they gave me antibiotics. Then I spent the next 2 days in recovery where I was literally feeling the battle going on between the antibiotics and whatever was going on in my stomach and gut. So that was a fun experience, and believe me, I freaked the hell out. Just couldn't handle it. I tried to, my brain was just telling me to get out of the hospital. Left the hospital and then realized, oh yeah, I don't have a phone, so I had to go back into the hospital anyways. So went back in, but had freaked out to the point that I was just like, I'm melting. Just bury me in ice or put me in a shower of cold water. Just do something. And they didn't, but they at least gave me something to finally go to sleep and didn't force me to take my pill non-stop anymore, which was a major relief because I think by that point my brain was overdosing on dopamine, where it's just going, there's only so much room, and I wasn't burning it off because I was lying in a bed. So it was a bad situation by that point. But by that point, I, I was fooling around with the Google Assistant on my phone when I was lucid. And I knew I didn't have um, an active phone. I'm just using a phone more as an MP3 player and a camera. Um, uh, so using that, I was able to talk to the Google Assistant in my family's home by just saying broadcast, which was funny. So I would get responses by email. But that day I just went, no, I need you to either come tomorrow or whatever, because I thought I was going to die. Just felt like I was going to die. They sent me home 2 Fridays ago. Or was it Saturday? Doesn't matter. Friday. By the time I got home, I went in on a Friday. I came out on a Friday. So I was there for a week. I was still throwing up and coughing up stuff from my lungs. There is a big difference between throwing up stuff from your stomach and throwing up stuff from your lungs. So for those with COVID, I sympathize, because with the amount of stuff that I've had buried in my lungs that I did not know was trapped down there by mucoidal plugs, another word I learned. Um, I was very surprised, and I'm happy that a lot of it's coming up, because at least it's getting out of me and I'm able to breathe a lot better. Still recovering though. It took me finally, after I think about 3 days, I got home, and well, after being home for like 2 days, my mom started giving me bone marrow broth. Uh, Small amounts, very small amounts, because I really wasn't sure if I could take a lot, and that helped to strengthen me up. So, spent a week recovering, coughing up more stuff, walking around with a bucket, and then spent pretty much the last week without the bucket. A couple of times I coughed up some stuff, but the coughing has subsided, so I gotta try to force myself to cough up stuff just in case there's stuff trapped in there, like I can hear in my voice right now. Still recovering, still getting my lungs back, but as I said, the most interesting part was the fact that I went from never even realizing how long I've had the Dopa Responsive Dystonia to suddenly having a aha moment and going, wow. Because I remember being a kid in school and zoning out to the point where I couldn't move anything. I would just be stuck in a staring at stuff, barely even blinking. So I won blinking contests all the time. Uh, and having the hearing the teacher and the conversations going on and people making fun of me or the teacher yelling at me and not being able to do anything, but still being able to talk and respond and say, sorry, I'm trying, but I can't. And everybody thinking I was just being weird. Now, I know it was minor mal seizures, but nobody looked into this stuff. Very different time. Trust me. And to realize that, wow, all of the worsening um, DR Dopa responsive dystonia side effects, including the spasms getting worse, the neck always being locked, or until the pill kicks in and returns me back to normal, uh, were as they worsened, were basically telling me that my brain going like, "Oh my God, there's so much shit going wrong inside you right now." And I kept on telling doctors or asking doctors to look into stuff, but I would they would pile it on top of the dopa responsive dystonia and say, "Oh well, you're just having that because of the dopa responsive dystonia. You're having the chest problems because of your dopa responsive dystonia. You're having the stomach problems and the breathing problems because of your dopa responsive dystonia," as opposed to ever actually investigating something different other than the cardiologist telling me it's not arrhythmia. So I knew it wasn't arrhythmia, but nobody ever bothered to look into anything else. They would tell me that my breathing sounded a little crackly, but other than that, nobody would look into it. Don't know why. Really don't. Just kind of brush it off because that's the way I was brought up. Brush it off. As long as you can walk, you can keep going. Um, but the thing is, since I got out of the hospital, because I don't have all the other ailments now that were there, I have found that the dopa responsive dystonia has actually become better. Um, I used to wake up like a hunchback, literally, like neck forward and arm all gimpy, and walk through the house and walk into the kitchen and with my good arm grab a coffee, go upstairs and stay in my cave because I'd wait for the pill to kick in, as he saw in, I think, the last video. Um, and now I wake up and the diurnal effects that I used to have are back, where if I get a good night's sleep, I've actually managed to build up naturally a bunch of dopamine. Now, yes, it will wear off and wear down, but that's when I'm back on my pill. But I am also back to a half a pill as opposed to a full pill now. So, in essence, if my Dopa responsive dystonia hadn't gotten as bad as it had, and I had not had the dystonic storms at the hospital, I think a lot of this stuff might have gotten ignored. Probably not, but it is a possibility. Just because my past, well, it was always ignored for years. So the fact that it was a reflection of directly the problems inside made it easier for them to want to explore it and solve the problem. So I'm glad that I have the dopa responsive dystonia, because had it not been getting so bad, I might never have known about the problems, but I never would have had the problems, or it never would have been bad if I didn't have the problems. So they're tied together, and yet it's always been with me now since I was a kid and I didn't even know. So now I've learned so much more. Um, so yeah, apparently also if you do have a major dystonic storm or even a minor dystonic storm, you should definitely uh, look into um, the go to the hospital, supposedly, according to the research I've done, because you're having an epileptic seizure, in essence. And epileptic seizures can really, really do some damage, especially with your breathing and other parts, apparently. Now, it's more stuff that I'm going to have to research, I guess, or get a grasp of. Um, but for the doctors, they found it fascinating because they were able to actually talk to somebody who was having a full-on seizure. So I'm a good learning tool. And for all those who are taking care of somebody with dystonia, dopa responsive dystonia, or others who have dopa responsive dystonia, if you notice your symptoms are getting worse, there might be something else wrong inside, and your brain is going, there's only so much I can take care of. Because for years I thought I know my brain was shutting other things down just because it had to focus on other stuff. Now I thought it was just on the simple stuff of breathing and digesting and stuff like that, and it was partially, but it was also all the other stuff that was going on that I didn't even know about. So, am I happy to be out of the hospital? Yes. And am I content with my dopa responsive dystonia? Yes. Um, am I happy that all the other stuff is fixed? Yes. And am I happy to finally be able to start to breathe better? Yes, very much. So, all in all, it was a positive experience, even if it was a painful and somewhat torturous experience as well. But I once again survived, and that is going to be other stories that I'm probably going to tell, because I've died a lot in my life or come really freaking close to it. Um, so yeah, guess that's it for this one. Sorry if it was a little long-winded. Trying out a new camera. So hope this worked.